Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on here. I was on Pearson Access, yes. So this is a system. If you do not have access to Pearson Access Next, or you have gotten access and you've never logged in, it would be really great to do that. If you need any help logging in or getting access to this system for DACs or test coordinators, those are the primary people who have accounts in these. Please let me know. The first big deadline is the ACT test date selection. Other than accommodations, this is the first thing you need to do. And what you're going to do is tell ACT. Can you still see my slides, guys? Yep, okay, thank you. This is the test date selection is coming up. It is open on November 7th, when Pearson Access Next or PA Next or PAN, whatever abbreviation you want to use. It opens on November 7th. You have until December 9th to notify ACT which window, the first window or the second window, and if you're testing paper or online. So when you are testing partial, let's say you're going to test half and half. You're going to test half your students on paper and half your students online. You would still want to choose the paper test date because the computer is confused by that. Otherwise, you may not get the materials you need. Or if you're testing paper and you're going to do some makeups online, choose the paper. Don't choose paper and the online test date. Just choose the paper date so that you do get the materials you need. You will have to fill in the accommodation test date and just choose that window that is appropriate. If you are choosing to test online and all of your students that have accommodations are testing online, you will still need to choose a paper test date just because the system won't let you move forward. But you will need to request that online testing in their accommodation application. Okay. The materials receipt week, the deadline for that, I know there's no dates in this slide, but the material receipt week is for materials like manuals and irregularity reports and rosters. It is not necessarily your test booklets. So when you're choosing that, think about that in consideration. That doesn't mean you're going to get your test booklets that week. It means you're going to get your other materials that week. Normally, if you choose the first test window, you'll get your test date, your test booklets 2 weeks in advance. If you choose the second test window, you may get it a week and a half before test date. That is just the system and how that works. I wish I could do better for you. And then hopefully no one's doing the not testing. Some programs, some external programs use the not testing portion of that question, but most everyone else will be selecting a test date before December 9th. Okay. Okay, I'm up to date. Good. No questions in the chat, but you could come off mute too, guys. And just, it's us, you know, it's cool. ACT accommodations and English learner supports. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this because this seems to still be our hugest volume of questions is about accommodations and what accommodations are allowed. What documents do I need to have? So I put in this link to the quick start guide for requesting accommodations, and it really is just a simple one-two sheeter that helps you determine where that student might fit in the accommodation, in their accommodation list, and how to process through that. There are accommodations for EL students. There's also accommodations for EL students who have IEPs as well as just being English learners. So you can do that as well. I want to make sure you do that. They can have extended time They can use a word-to-word bilingual dictionary, and they can have the written directions translated in these 18 languages. So these are the questions. These are the frequently asked questions about accommodations. So I thought I'd stick them in here and give you some answers. Who can request accommodations? Any school member or the staff at your school or district can be the test accommodation coordinator. It is common for the ACT test coordinator, the accommodations, or to be the accommodations test coordinator or the SPED person at your school to have that position, of principals, of DACs, anybody who you feel is the important person. And you can have multiples. You don't have just one for a district, you know, that way you have coverage over that. So, and anyone who has access to the TAA and has requested to be a test accommodation coordinator can request accommodations. So the next question is, what is the difference between reconsideration and late consideration, or what we call qualified qualified exemption? So reconsiderations is if you've applied for the accommodation and you didn't get what you expected, or you were denied everything, maybe because of the IEP is out of date. There's lots of reasons, right? You can request what kind of documentation ACT needs, and then resubmit it basically for a reconsideration. Late consideration or qualified exemption are those like somebody comes in late to your district. You might have what do you call that? New student move in right before testing, and they have an IEP from their other school or whatever, you can do that late consideration. Late consideration is not available if you miss the deadline. So you will be denied on that. But if they're new to your district or they have a new IEP. So one of the most important questions I get is who requests the accommodations for students in external programs. So it varies from program to program. So the best thing to do is have great communication with those programs. And a lot of schools, you know, the program is doing such a great job taking care of the students' needs, you might not think about if they need accommodations for the ACT. You might not think about those. Just make sure you reach out to them and see if they're planning to apply for it, or if your school needs to apply for that. Whoever is caretaker of the IEP or 504 is usually who would do that. And then we have a spring deadline, which is January 27th on Friday. Who makes these requests? Anyone anyone on the staff. So it could be a DAC, it could be a test coordinator, it could be your SPED person. Does that answer that for you, Mary? It's up to you on a local level, whoever is best suited for that. Where, not who. Oh, okay, thank you. Where, that would be in the TAA system, test accessibility and accommodations system, and that is located in the success.act.org system on that platform. Thank you. Okay. Great, moving on. Okay, absolutely, okay. ACT online testing. Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to answer Jenna's questions for kids who are in. So I'm reading this for what Jenna had. Thank you, Dr. Jenna. For kiddos who are in YRTC facility, we go with the home school district since they are the keepers of the IEP. We ask that they upload the accommodations for all of our kiddos here. So, and that is 90% of the time. There are a few programs that do have, are the caregivers or the keepers of the IEP who are willing to submit those accommodations. So it's just a matter of talking with them and making sure that everyone's on the same page. So ACT online testing, I have a lot to talk about online testing. A lot of things have really moved in a positive way for online testing. And I hope that you would consider it as a district if you aren't already. Options for testing, online testing. These are just my suggestions and what I've seen other schools do. A paper for most students and using the online testing for makeups. That's a great way to jump in and learn about the online testing and what it takes to set up your school for online testing. Some schools do split the student list half and half do paper, half do online, or some do all their standard students online and their accommodation students on paper. Or some schools do all students test online unless the accommodation is not available, and that would be like Braille or something like that. Really, very few accommodations are not available for online testing. Okay, this is a great slide, the pros and cons. The cons can outweigh the pros. I'm just going to say that. I know, I realize that. But there are more test dates to test if you test online, 18 online. Oh, Kathleen, thank you so much. Ms. Townsend says, Grand Island went total online and it went pretty smoothly last year. We will do it again this year. And you do learn a lot that first year. There's a learning curve to that. So appreciate that, thanks. 18 dates online versus the 3 paper dates. Reduced materials to handle. ACT is working towards, if you test online, that there's no paper materials to handle, which is pretty exciting. Earlier score availability, we've seen that. Ease of administration. I think once you learn the process, yes, it is easy, but I think that first year there's a lot to learn. So that would be my perspective anyway. And students are
Iris?
Yes.
So this is Kathleen Townsend, hey, Kathleen, at Grand Island, and I just would really encourage everyone to do online. As far as materials to handle, it just made me be able to, I'm the school counselor, to be able to be with my students more. When we do it paper pencil, there's so much time where I can't be in my office that I felt like it was hurting my students. And then there was just, a few learning curves, but all of the teachers loved it too. Everybody giving the test, the teachers were much more on board, and we got our test scores so quickly. It was just amazing. So I would encourage everyone to do it.
And how many students did you test in one day, Kathleen? Roughly.
We tested every 11th grader. And then 10th grade was paper pencil. So I think we tested about 500 kids, 527, I think.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yep.
And so I'm going to read some of these. Carrie shares with us that we love online testing. Small districts can do it too. So much better and less room for error. Thank you, Misty. And Deb says we had way too many technical problems to do online tests for the entire year again. Understood. I think overall across the state, most people use Chromebooks when they test online. It could be wrong. There's some districts that don't have that, but for the most part, that's what I've seen. There we go. Thanks, Misty. Oh, there you go. You had laptops and Chromebooks at. There you go. Ryan, I am thinking that you're right. He's asking if this physical spacing is the same as paper pencil, and I think it is pretty much. But let me check on that to make sure. Great. This is great. Okay. I'm looking at Angie's question here. Do we have to use the same testing mode for all students with accommodations? And I'm not exactly sure what you mean by testing mode. Not all students would have the same. Some would have time and a half, some would, does that make sense? You would have separate rooms.
Do all your students with accommodations have to take paper pencil? Or
No.
Can some of them take paper pencil and some of them take online?
There's very few that cannot take online, and that would be the number one is Braille, because you have to have the physical book. But I think almost every other, I think there's one other accommodation that's a really rare accommodation, cannot test online, but everyone else can test.
So
online.
it doesn't have to be all or none.
Right.
I mean, they don't all have to, all your accommodated students have to take paper pencil.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Look at this. This is great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Some of the other things that people mentioned that reduce misadministration and prohibitive behaviors, especially gritting ahead or behind, that's just totally out of the equation. You just can't do it. Once you stop, once the time is up, once the student submits the test, they can't go back in and try and catch any of those other questions. So that would be a reduction, and that would be a great benefit to our students and to the state as a whole. The writing prompt, students really like the typing versus the handwriting, and the on-screen timer. This was a big one. I was really interested in observing how that works, and I think it's wonderful that kids can just look at their own screen. They don't have to look up at the clock. They don't have to be distracted, and it's a little easier for them to keep track of their time and how to use it wisely. And like I mentioned before, the iPad's now available. One school mentioned that even though there's a pre-test work to set up, there's a lot of pre-test work to do, that the day of the test is less stressful for both the staff and their students. So the cons, the pre-test setup, the infrastructure, and your devices, those are, and some of those are absolutely understandable and just can't get past that. It also has a calculator available. Yeah, there's a lot of things online that you can do. You can do the zoom it up, and if your kids need a larger print, those kind of things, all of that's available. Can the timer be shut off? I have a couple students have test anxiety. I think that's a possibility, but Mr. Shaky, let me find out for you, okay? 3 states, Jeremy wanted me to mention this, that 3 states who test the ACT for their state for accountability test completely online. The schools don't have an option unless an accommodated student can't test online. And those 3 states are Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arizona. They had 90 to 100% online with very few issues. Oklahoma tells us that none of their schools want to go back to paper pencil. So he wanted to make me sure that I mentioned those things, because we hear about that in our ACT meetings with the states. So just to let you know. Okay. And Bethany is sharing with us about the online testing. The loading. let me take that back to Bethany and see if that has been, if there's been some updates in the system. And so I'm thinking that may have been resolved. Yesterday, we had an opportunity to go to Millard, and I'm going to shout out to Darren Kelberlaw and the great people at Horizon High School. Tony, I saw you were on. Just had an amazing experience yesterday with a new platform that is going to replace the Pearson Access Next test administration. And they tested their students online with the ACT, and it went really smoothly. There were a few hiccups, but for overall, I would say it was a great experience. I don't know if either one of you want to come off mute and share what happened yesterday, but it was pretty exciting to see this new platform.
Yeah, we tested our juniors college reportable scores on the new ACT Now platform, and I would say it's light years ahead of PA Next. It was super intuitive, it's clean, it's crisp, simple to use. The integration between district administrator and Tony at the building was good. We kind of partnered in the steps, and the students enjoyed it. And we've been testing online for makeups, like many people do, I think. And yeah, we look forward to the new system.
Yeah, I think that will be available in 2024 unless something comes up, but we look forward to that. I think you all will see great benefits and great opportunities to have reduced work in providing the ACT, whether you test paper or you test online. This system is going to help us run a smoother test administration. So I'm looking forward to that. And I just thought I wanted to share that with y'all. And Millard was one of the few schools across the state that was able to participate in that pilot. And from what I hear from ACT, it's going well across the other few locations that are testing. They did a round in the spring and that went really well. And then we're doing another round of testing in the fall. And we want to make sure it's right before we provide it to everybody. So look forward to that. Okay, here's some information that Jeremy also wanted me to share. So about online testing. When testing online, the need for scrolling through passages and navigating between items may slow students down or increase. These are things that people think that might happen. According to the research, the scrolling, those are common concerns, but they conducted a series to evaluate whether the time should be added for online testing, but the results ultimately did not support extending the time limit so that students would have extra time for that. Yesterday, when we were working through that online testing in Millard, it didn't seem to be an issue at all. I think there was one instance of it. So I think overall, I think that the platform itself is more stable and has been improved. It constantly trying to be improved. And so I think that is less of an issue than it has been in the past. Talking about how might online testing be easier than paper testing. It might be faster. On-screen timers may promote time management. The interface sometimes scrolls automatically. Typing essays, yes, we know that that's easier and faster. And this is some of the information that was provided with the ACT research in regards to online testing. And some of the surveys responded, I was able to save time because I didn't have to worry about bubbling in the answers on the answer sheet. And they didn't get off track bubbling in the Scantron, flipping back and forth. So pluses and minuses, but I think overall that online testing can be a great experience. And I say can. I know that it is not always. So here's some other information that was shared with ACT research in the survey from the students themselves. I'm not going to read through all of that because you guys all want to not hear me talk all of the time. So, and this was, I thought this was rather interesting that the, talking about the English test and how that automatically scrolls and how they read on it. You can highlight instances. But overall in this study, and now this study was in 2015, but they were more likely to answer items correctly and less likely to leave items blank. And they were more likely to report having enough time to finish the test. So in this last quote, and this is all from the research people at ACT, so it's not my language, and I'm just going to share that with you so that these findings were consistent with the notion that taking the reading test online is less speeded on average and than taking it on paper. So there you go. Here's some timing takeaways. The challenge, some students and educators perceive that it takes longer than testing on paper. However, we don't feel that that's, they would have performed differently if they had did the other mode. They may have run out of time regardless of the testing mode, or they might have earned lower scores if they tested on paper. So that's some information for you from our friends in research. One last thing, if you have any questions about online testing, and I will take this, when will the new platform begin? Sorry, ACT now is scheduled for spring of 2024. But if you have questions, and I'm going to respond to some of those questions you've got in the chat and go back to my people in the online department and get those answers for you and see how, if we can't resolve some of those issues that schools have had in the past, so that you might consider taking that leap again. Let me know if you want to talk about online testing. So my ACT is where we would have students register online for tests on a Saturday, a national test, but also for the school sponsor or the state sponsored test at the school. The interest inventory or the non-COG questions, however you want to call that, the general information is requested. There's some mandatory questions like your address, the high school, those kind of things, but everything else is optional. There's you will be provided with some information and a code so that the state scores are connected to whatever account that student might have, like if they have a previous account from a national test, those kind of things. And that comes in that materials in the spring before your tests arrive. But there's a link here for the instructions for test coordinators. It's a great, provides detailed information on how to, with keys to success in getting that interest inventory and those questions answered. That information can change the data on your reports. I'm just going to say that. If your students don't provide the interest inventory or the non-cognitive questions, they don't put in their scores from their classes, it can, if that information is not available, then your final report information will be partially blank. So it's in your best interest to try and get them to provide that. I know you can't get everybody to do that, but if you can, it gives you a better picture of where the students are headed as overall and gives you some other data points to consider. Yes, Beth asks if the kids fill this out online, do you still need the paper signed by the parents for ACT to send scores to colleges? Yes, because they are underage. The US DOE has requested that we have some kind of confirmation that the parents are aware and they approve. So because it's a third party, it's not ACT only that will be receiving that information. The deadline for that information is 2 days after testing, approximately 30 minutes to complete. They will need the personalized copy of the non-test instructions and a copy of taking the ACT booklet. And they will answer those questions in ACT.org. And some students aren't going to be available, won't have an email address. They won't have their home address. They may not know their scores for the classes they took in their sophomore year, those kind of things. If you can facilitate any of that information, I think you'll get better data. I'll go through this. Move it on. Okay. Here's our favorite question. What are the misadministration and prohibitive behaviors in spring 2022? Here are the most common. The timing was incorrect. The wrong test booklet was given. The wrong accommodation was provided. Those were the misadministrations. And then the prohibitive behaviors, working ahead or behind, and cell phones or electronics that disrupt the test session. I'm going to show you this slide here before we move on. This really shows you the prohibitive behaviors of spring 2021 and spring 2022. When I first started here 5 years ago, the misadministrations were almost as high as the prohibitive behaviors. So I want to say a shout out to people who really work hard to not have those issues, especially with accommodation booklets, those kind of things, timing issues. I think we've really worked together to make those numbers relatively small in comparison. Sometimes you can't change the prohibitive behaviors because they're students and they'll do what they're going to do. But if you are talking to your students before the test, make sure they're aware that your job is to come around and check to make sure they're not gridding in the wrong test, that they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing, that's your responsibility, and what the consequences are. So if a student has a cell phone or something like that, his test is voided. If it goes off, his test is voided, and he may not get an opportunity to test again in the spring. We're working with test administration to see if we can change that, but at this time, once you have a prohibitive behavior, you can't test again in that cycle. So you wouldn't be able to test in the spring. Even if you tested in test window 1, if the occurrence happened in that, they could not test in test window 2 or 3. So making the students aware of the importance of that, I think will help. I don't know that we can ever get these numbers lower than they are, but we could try. So that's what we're working towards. But I'm really excited about the misadministrations and how low that number is, because you guys are working as hard as you can with that. Appreciate that. State use questions. We ask these in PA Next every year, usually later on after the test, because most of these questions are relevant to whether they tested or not. So, and these are what the test questions are going to be. They are not on the test booklet. The students do not answer these. This is something that a test coordinator or DAC can answer in PA Next under each student. The first question is, has the school received parental consent that allows ACT to share scores and information with third parties? If you leave it blank, that means you got it. If you did not, then you can answer no. Okay, or the student has not yet, and the school has not received parental consent to release these scores. So, and parental consent, I'm going to talk about that form later and have a link for that. The second question is pretty much the same as it has been in previous years. State use question, if number 2 is if the student did not test, select the reason below. They may be an alternate student and they accidentally in the ACT list. They had emergency medical waiver. They're exempt for several reasons. Whether they're a homeschool student, they may not be a full-time equivalent, not currently enrolled. They moved out or they're not moved in yet. All of these things, parental refusal, student refusal, been removed from the list. Maybe they weren't part of the cohort. Then their district was unable to test. They were just not able to get the student in the seat with a test. Or we also have score replacement option, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. You will not see COVID as an option here. We did remove that. So that is not an option for why they didn't test this year. Question number 3 is why a student was dismissed for prohibitive behavior and they walked out with test incomplete or refused to test, worked ahead or behind, possessed all of these are, and then other. If you put other, Maggie, Sis and I will probably ask you what the other was, so that we have a complete idea of why students were dismissed. And so we'll just reach out to you individually if these other reasons don't cover the reason why your student had a prohibitive behavior. So, and those will be in Pearson Access next.
Could I interrupt you,
Yes, ma'am.
Iris? This is
Yes,
Maggie.
ma'am.
I just want to say how important this question is with your prohibited behavior. If you answer this question, most likely, and I won't have to reach out to you during the summer months. And this might be a good opportunity to also express my, so I asked the districts to fill out that spreadsheet last year, right after the test season, right after you tested. It was fresh in your mind. You guys provided a lot of information. Thank you, thank you. It was very, very helpful for me. I didn't have to reach out to a lot of you because of it. And so I'm going to do that again this spring. I'll send out that spreadsheet. And if you guys can fill them out and send them back, less work during the summer. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, Maggie, that was a great idea, and it really was beneficial to her to get those answers and to not bother you guys. And your test coordinators are normally not there over the summer, so it's better to get that information sooner. Yeah, and thank you so much, Maggie, for all the work you do to make sure that we get that information. I'm going to move on to pre-ACT. That pre-ACT, you can test juniors or third year or second year cohort, I better not say juniors, right? In the fall, and the second year cohort in the spring. Fall testing has already started, and that ends on November 23rd. Spring ordering, if you're testing in the spring, you can order materials in February. That email will come out, I think the end of January, when that window will open. Be sure to order just the amount you need. ACT will send you a few extra. Last year, we had a 20% increase of ordering materials that were never used. So please consider that. The testing window in the spring is March 13th to April 31st, and we try and do that to correspond with the ACT in case you want to test on the same day, which a lot of you guys do, and it seems to work. Be sure to return all your tests from your individual schools in one batch so that they are scored together and you get one score report. If you have to wait for a makeup test, wait for the makeup test to be done and then send it all in one packet. District and school reports for the pre-ACT are now available in Success Online Reporting. You won't see a report for fall testing until everyone's done, and probably late December, 1st of January is when that report will be available. And then printed individual reports are sent to the schools. For the individual ones are printed and sent to the schools, and then the aggregate report. Oh my goodness, sorry. Let me get a drink of water. is sent after that window is closed. ACT online prep is the other choice that a district can make. It is open. It opened on October 5th. It's available to students, the third year cohort students of those districts. And that is available until June 30th of 2023. They close those windows, those accounts on June 30th. So let your students know. We previously had available for a year from when they logged in. That is no longer what the platform allows. So the other information about ACT online prep is that ACT has decided to continue to offer that. And we had been told numerous times that it was not going to be available anymore. And they made that decision and have increased some of the platform availability and some of the training availability. And it is available in this ACT online prep success training toolkit. It is new and it's really a great resource. I think you get a lot out of it if you use AOP at your schools. Please consider looking into that if you're not already. Okay, we're moving really fast. You guys have no questions for me yet. I mean, not a lot of questions. So if you feel like you want to ask a question, please do so. I want to answer as best I can and have those answers for you too. If I don't know right off the top of my head. We're going to talk about ACT reporting. We're going to talk about some changes. You probably got an email from ACT saying a 1050 file from Pearson Access Next will no longer be available. And you went, what's a 1050 file? Because that's what I said. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but so when I went to ask, a 1050 file is the student data file, the NPA Next. So all three of these reports are district reports. I just did a screenshot of one of our districts. And so the profile report is that great purple report that gives you all kinds of information about gender and different levels of, gives you 5-year trends of all kinds of things of your students and the state. That report won't exist on PA Next. We're working towards finding a way to provide that on the Success ACT.org platform. We're working on that, and that's what I was talking about earlier. And Dawn Mazzy had asked about that, and the training. And so I'm working really hard with them and pushing really hard for this, that we get really good training, we get a really good replacement. I'm not going to say substitute because I don't want a substitute. I want a replacement. I want something that we can find on Success that is not hard for us to find, that is not a time-consuming job, because I know that you guys use this report, the profile report. I know you use the student data report, the 1050 file. The student level data file is going to be a whole lot easier. Yes, we really do. Everyone really needs that profile report. It has so much information. And so some of you have reached out to me and provided me with information to share with ACT. I am sharing that information with ACT and letting them know from your perspective how important that report is, and they're listening. So kudos to you guys. It's important that we, and I feel like that's really my biggest job, is to be your voice to ACT, because they don't understand how people would use that report. I mean, it's a great report, nice little report, but how do they use it? They don't understand. And so you guys providing to me how you use it on a regular basis and how important it is to your job, and the time that it would take to find that information otherwise is crucial in for us to explain to them how important this is. So we're working towards that. The data file on the students was a lot easier for them to come up with, of course, a replacement for that. And I don't think we will have an issue finding that information in success. I do think that time will tell whether we get really what we need for the profile report. It may come in each tab of the year. I'm not sure how that'll work, but I'll keep working to get what we need and be your biggest cheerleader along the way. That's true. I get that. Bethany is saying that the format of the data doesn't change from year to year too. Otherwise, how do you compare that with year to year? How do you utilize that, right? I get that. Okay. So this is the account that I've been talking about, success.act.org, where you can find your test scores and reports. You can find an access to Pearson Access Next. Now, this is my screenshot, so I don't have access to the accommodations platform, but most of you do. So you won't see that on here. But if you do need access to TAA, the Test Accessibility and Accommodation System, you can look at this bottom tab that says Manage My Access and request that. Or if you need help with that, please let me know. I've got some great information on how to make that happen. All right. So I get a lot of questions about how to look at the data on the online reporting. And if you go into, once you go into the Success account, it looks like this basically. It asks you what program do you want? And the ACT all data is all of the test results. So that would be whether it's the national test, the state test, anything else, even international testing, like if your student were a foreign exchange student somewhere and tested ACT, that score report would be available to you as long as that student used their state ID number. So all of that would fall under the all data. So if you want what your state is doing all across the board for ACT, all those tests, that would be what you would choose. If you just want third year cohort information, you would choose the ACT state contract. Or if you just want to look at pre-ACT, you want to look at pre-ACT. So that is one of the big questions. Where do I find my data? And so that's what the difference is between those three. ACT Trusted Agent, a couple of years ago during the pandemic, we decided to instill a role for ACT so that you could have access to success and the scoring. A trusted agent is a role that ACT developed to protect that, PII information of your students. They can be anybody on your staff. I highly recommend that the DAC and at least one other person, even if you have a small school, have access to the trusted agent role, because things happen and maybe you need access right away. But it is up to between you, it's your local decision. If the superintendent wants to be the person who has trusted agent access, great, that's perfect. However you want to utilize that data and who has, usually DACs have the most responsibility in regards to having that access to that data. So that makes the most sense to me, but your school might be different. You might have a person who just does the assessment data, and that person should be a trusted agent. But if you do not have anyone who is a trusted agent at your school and does not have that access to success, please let me know and I will help you set that up. Okay. I think we're getting through this really fast. I don't think we'll even take a break, and I will send you guys off way early than we anticipated, which is okay. But we'll have questions too. I have time for questions as well. So condition of the graduating class 2022 report. That's something that you usually get every year. Last couple of years, we've had to, each school had to request it, and that continues to be the way you obtain the graduating class report. Dominic Ione is a really great guy. He happens to be the Nebraska account executive, and he can help you, provide you with things like maybe you want district testing for the ACT in the fall, or you want to do pre-ACT, you want to pay for pre-ACT yourself, and the state pays for ACT online prep, you know, he's the person to contact. So he's more than just the graduating class report. But if you have not received that yet, please reach out to Dominic and he will provide that for you. I've got his email address here. Really great guy. He is a previous educator and really understands what schools need. So like him a lot. I hope you get opportunity to talk to him or reach out to him. But if you want that graduating class report, that is the report of your graduating class from 2022, and it will be the most recent ACT test they took. So if they took one in the spring as their junior, but took it again in the fall or winter, or even in the spring of their senior year, it would be that most recent test, not the best score. So keep that in mind when you're looking at those reports. And Dominic is great at talking about how to use the report, how to look at the report, which can glean out of that report. Great information. Okay, we'll move on. ACT family letter. This is a documentation that NDE created to provide to families talking about the ACT. It provides the cut scores and how their student scores will compare to where the state would have them, and whether they're developing on track or meeting the ACT college and career readiness level. So it gives the cut scores, but it also gives a description of each level. And NDE is asking districts to provide that to students as they walk out of the test and give that to their family. You could also provide it to them a PDF via email if you feel that that's a better way to get that to your parents, however you decide locally. We also have parental consent forms. Now, parental consent forms are strictly for anything that ACT might send to a third party. So that would include the Educational Opportunities Service, or the EOS, which is a service that ACT provides and offers to students on the MyACT platform in regards to college information, scholarships, all that great stuff, so they can get information about something that they're interested in regards to their interest inventory. You know, they try to coordinate that a bit. And so Julie is asking, how do I find these NDE letters and PDFs? So they are on the NDE NSCAS ACT website page. But these links in this slide will click you to it too. Okay. And there's a parental consent guidance. So if you are new and don't understand what I'm talking about, I don't want to waste your time or all the group's time going through all of the guidance. But Jeremy has a great PDF there of why we are asking you to have parental consent. And thank you, Stacy. And Maggie also, and what the U.S. Department of Education has asked Nebraska to do. So that guidance is a really great overview of what, and why, you know, all that good stuff. And then the form is pretty straightforward for parents, and then it comes in Spanish, but you could also do a telephone call and get confirmation in that regards. This directly, not only the EOS, but also college scores. So if your student wants to send out scores to colleges, they have to have a parental consent form signed. That's just how it is. So, because it's a third party. You don't submit those forms, you would hang on to these forms for yourself, like any other documents that you keep. If your district says keep those kind of documents for 3 years, then that's what you do. I would recommend at least a year, if not longer. It's just to protect your school and your district. Yeah. We can talk a little bit about the ACT replacement form. So way back when I started, a student had an issue about not taking the test again because they were concerned that that would affect their scores that they would have to send to a college. And granted, I get that. And that was before we had ACT had super scoring. So that also kind of played into that. But an ACT score replacement form can be used for students who's taken the ACT before the third year cohort takes it, and they have a score that meets the ACT college and career standards. So the score, I put that little box of the cut scores there. And it's also on the form. You will have to have parents' signature on that so that they know that the student won't be testing again. That the thought is that this replacement is for students who with high scores that don't want to test again or don't want to test, for whatever, use it sparingly. Not every student is probably not going to fit into these scores. And then we as a team look at those scores and sign off on them, and then the student doesn't have to test in the spring. So, but let's see. I do believe that there's a deadline in March for those, so that we get those ahead of time so we know who won't be testing. And Maggie does a great job of keeping track of those as well, and make sure that your school doesn't get a ding for those. Ooh, I'm almost at the end. Hang on. See, Corey, I didn't do 4 hours. How about that? I'm talking too fast, maybe. So here are my list of resources, reach out to me. If Jeremy were here, he would say, who is your first point of reference? Call Iris first, right? So I try to be available for you as best I can. It's not always easy sometimes, but please, if you don't get a hold of me on the phone, send me an email. Let me know what your questions are. I'll do my best to get an answer for you. If I'm not available, there's ACT. You can ask general questions. There's the phone number and a form to contact them. And accommodations has a different extension. You're probably going to be calling them more than the general ACT line, but reach out to them, and you can reach out to them via email. Though sometimes the email is faster. And the same with pre-ACT, there's a phone number, but sometimes the email gets responded to sooner than the phone calls. So there you go. I'm going to talk a minute about fee waivers. Okay. Amy asking, what if the student did not take the writing portion on the ACT on their own and wants to use a score replacement? Really quick answer to that is I use their English and their reading scores and divide it by 3. And if it's over a score of 20, it's acceptable. Pretty easy answer. And we just do that on an NDE level. It's for accountability. It's not about, it's not about college score reports. Okay. So I hope that helps. Fee waivers. I really want to encourage you to consider fee waivers for your students for opportunities like a senior retake. If your student qualifies, there's all kinds of information about the ACT waiver in this program, ACT fee waiver program link that I have here. You can have more score reports. I think it's unlimited score reports sent if you take the test with the ACT fee waiver, and it will cover a national test date, a Saturday morning test date with or without writing. So pretty amazing. And it's only for 11th or 12th graders. And usually if they qualify for free or reduced lunches, then they qualify for the fee waiver. But if you have questions about that, please let me know. Okay, next. I'm almost out. Oh, I've got like this and one last one. Okay, so I wanted to share with you, and I put this in red because this is 2023, 2024 test dates. And so March 26th, April 9th, and April 23 are are going to be the paper test dates. You will notice that in the standard and ACT authorized accommodation dates for online testing, each test window has 9 test dates instead of 6. So they've extended the online testing dates and have a total of 27 test dates for online testing. Huge, huge change in ACT's mindset on the online testing. We had done that the first year we had tested Tuesday through the next Friday, and it seemed like Mondays and Fridays were not a big day of testing. They've changed their mind about that. They want to give you as much opportunity to test as possible. So kudos to them, ACT, for thinking outside the box. I think these dates are really comparable to the ones we've had in the previous years. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Yeah, I know, right? Like, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that ACT listens to us. It's become more of an atmosphere of listening to the customer, which we really appreciate. So if you have a concern or something that you really feel passionate about the ACT and just are not getting any headway, please let me know and we'll figure out a way to communicate that to those people who can make a difference. And that's, I feel like that's one of my biggest goals here in my position, is to advocate for you. That being said, I don't always get the right answer or our answer or the answer we want, but we keep trying. And sometimes if we keep asking, they finally did, okay, fine, we'll look at that. So a lot of players involved in making those changes. So sometimes you know, you never know what's going to happen, but we continue to ask, though the worst they can say is no. So please use these test dates for your calendar. I know your calendars are already filling up for 23, 24. So wanted to make sure you had this as soon as you possibly could. At this time, I'm at the end of my presentation and I didn't take 2 hours or 4 hours. I didn't even take 2 hours. How about that? That was great. I hope that you have some kind of questions for me. Otherwise, we'll really be done early. And so I'm going to come off of share here, sharing my screen, and tell me what kind of questions do you have?
Iris, will you have office hours again this year?
Where we talk about individual topics like online and accommodations and those kind
Right.
of things.
Just if someone has a question, I mean, obviously we can just
Right.
email or call you anytime, but if
Right.
that's helpful.
No, they decided to go against that. It was too many man hours for as much
Okay.
as many people were not participating. But some of those workshops that we'd had in the past, though, those webinars are available. And so if someone had a specific question, they could view those previous ones that we had in the past. And so that might be beneficial. The slides will be available. I'm going to make sure that's available and the recording's available, even though we got started a little late. Sorry about that. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, I'm going to answer Reagan's question. They test online, and the question is, can she be a proctor for an accommodated student if I have a child taking the ACT this year? If you are not in the same room as your family member, yes. Right. Sometimes it's hard to find people to fill all those roles of proctors. So, but anyone who is on your staff at your school or your district can be a proctor. Julie, there is not I don't believe there is a form for parents opting out. In the past, I know that we've asked that the parent write or type something up and sign it, or
That-
send an email. Is
I
that
can add a little
recommended?
bit more. That is a district level letter that you can produce, but it must be in writing. And you want to make sure that it's specific to which test and the dates, if it's going to be spring 2023 ACT.
Thank you.
And then you keep it on file at the district, that you do not need to send those letters to NDE.
So I don't know exactly when ACT provided the communication that iPads are okay. It's possible that that rep did not know that they are available. It is only for state testing. It's not, it may not be for district testing. And so that might have been the definition. It was very recent, probably end of August, beginning of September, that they notified us that, and that we could share that with states. So, but this spring, it will be available. It's not currently available, but in the spring it will be.
Hey, Iris, this is Lois again with the iPad thing. Do you
Okay.
know, and I guess I'm just, because this ACT rep was like, oh, no, security reasons, we can't do iPads. You made a bad choice when you chose your technology, basically.
Oh, no.
Do you know how they are going to provide that? Because like right now for the pre-ACT and for accommodations, it's a USB. So I guess
Oh.
I'm asking a technical question that maybe you don't have an answer to.
You know what? I'm going to have to look that up, Lois. I don't know. And I apologize profusely about anybody who would make you feel bad about the technology you choose. I think ACT didn't have the ability to put iPads on this particular platform for a very long time. And so and I think it was a huge lift for them. And so that they kind of waited until they had the technology and the ability to make that available. So I think that's why, and not everyone has that information across it's not well known across the ACT community that iPads are going to be available for just state testing, because not everybody's involved in state testing. So that could be where that miscommunication was. But I do have some resources on the iPad, and I will check into that and see what happens. Okay, great. And so when I know more about the iPads, that there is a link in the slides, and the slides will be available. But also I will reach out to both Lois and to Meg. Anybody else, you just send me an email or whatever you want to do, or put it in the chat that you want more information about iPads. I will direct that to you specifically, and I'll find out that answer. Okay. Let me think. Is there anything else I can think of that I can tell you? That my that the weather is driving me nuts. Okay, that's totally off the ACT subject line, but there you go. Cold and hot and cold, and if I have not answered your question today, I've not covered something that you guys want to know more about, please reach out to me. Please, I don't know, call me, email me. Just really appreciate that. Jill